Usually when we think about a meeting between two world leaders, we picture, like, closed doors and ceremonial flags. A highly choreographed handshake for the cameras.
Yeah, exactly. It feels entirely disconnected from your actual day-to-day reality, right? We just assume those geopolitical photo ops happen in some distant stratosphere.
Right. Well, we just go about our normal lives, buying groceries and paying rent.
Yeah.
But today, we are going to look at how a handshake on a runway in Beijing can, theoretically, change the color of the potato chip bag you are holding in your hand right now.
It sounds kind of crazy, but the supply chain mechanics behind that connection are incredibly real. And, well, they highlight just how tightly wound our global systems have become.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking high-stakes geopolitical maneuvering between the U.S. and China and tracing the surprising domino effect hitting Japanese grocery stores.
And housing markets, actually. Plus, we'll explore a long-fought revision to Japan's justice system and close with a truly historic moment for Japanese cinema and science.
Yeah, the mission for today is to uncover the invisible threads. We want to show you how macro-level global trade, systemic legal structures, and cultural milestones are all deeply interconnected.
Right, because none of these events happen in a vacuum. I mean, every headline impacts the other.
Let's start at the highest macro level possible. U.S. President Trump has just arrived in Beijing for a summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is his first visit in about 9 years, I think.
Yeah, roughly 9 years. Air Force One touched down around 9 p.m. local time, and he was greeted by about 300 cheering students on the tarmac.
Which, that kind of reception is highly choreographed. It's designed to project a specific atmosphere of diplomatic goodwill before the intense negotiations even begin.
Exactly. And the agenda for those negotiations is vast. They're covering international trade balances, the escalating situation in Iran, and, of course, the geopolitical status of Taiwan.
Right. And Trump has been very public about his goals. He posted on social media that his primary objective is to ask President Xi to open China's market.
But what is truly staggering is the entourage he brought with him. He didn't just bring diplomats, He brought 17 top corporate executives.
Wait, really? Like who?
We are talking about Elon Musk from Tesla, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, and Tim Cook from Apple.
Oh, wow. Putting those specific individuals in the room completely changes the nature of the negotiation, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
By bringing the leaders of the world's most dominant EV, AI, and consumer electronics companies, the U.S. is essentially placing the engines of the 21st century global economy right on the table.
It's an overwhelming display of economic leverage, and it's exactly that leverage that has people in Taiwan deeply anxious right now.
Yeah, recent surveys indicate that over 60% of the Taiwanese population rejects the idea of peaceful reunification with China. So there's a very real fear there.
A fear that Taiwan might be treated as a bargaining chip, like to secure massive corporate trade wins for the U.S.
Precisely. The anxiety hinges on diplomatic language. Historically, the United States has maintained a stance of, quote, not supporting Taiwan independence.
Right, that passive phrasing is a cornerstone of the region's fragile status quo.
Exactly. And the fear circulating right now is that the U.S. might strike an economic deal that requires them to shift that language to actively opposing Taiwan independence.
Moving from passive non-support to active opposition is a monumental shift. It's like a high-stakes poker game where the U.S. brings the biggest tech CEOs as their chips.
And Taiwan feels like they're being positioned as the pot in the middle of the table. But looking at China's strategy, they aren't just sitting there waiting to negotiate over traditional tariffs.
No, they're not. They've actually built a completely separate tariff-free bypass on Hainan Island.
Right. Hainan is a perfect example of how a nation structurally defends against trade pressure. It's often called the Hawaii of China because of its tourism.
But now it's being engineered into this massive free trade powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Since last December, they expanded their zero tariff items from roughly 1,900 to over 6,100 items.
Which is a huge jump. It went from covering about 20% of items to a massive majority. Let's talk about how that actually works in practice, because the numbers are wild.
Yeah, there's this local cooking oil company based on Hainan Island that managed to grow its sales sixfold in just 4 years.
Sixfold? That's incredible. How did they pull that off?
They did it by importing zero-tariff soybeans and rapeseed from places like Canada and Brazil. They saved over 300 million yuan in tariffs just by rerouting their supply chain through the island.
And that is the crucial mechanism right there. I mean, traditional tariffs are designed to make importing goods from a specific country prohibitively expensive, right?
Right, to force domestic production or change trade behavior.
Exactly. But when a country designates a massive geographic zone as a duty-free hub and encourages companies to source from completely different continents, the impact of those original tariffs is fundamentally diluted.
So is Taiwan essentially being treated as the pot in this game? And does Hannon prove that traditional tariffs are basically becoming obsolete?
Well, they don't become completely obsolete, but their effectiveness is heavily diminished. It forces us to realize that global trade is no longer a linear transaction. It is a fluid, dynamic network.
If you block a river, the water doesn't just stop flowing. It cuts a new path.
And Hainan Island is that new path.
So how does that fluid, dynamic network actually impact the listener? How do high-level summits in Beijing, shifting supply chains and tensions over Iran, eventually reach your living room?
Well, let's look at the grocery store, specifically the snack aisle in Japan. Calbee, the massive snack manufacturer, recently announced a huge change.
Right. They're changing the packaging of 14 of their potato chip products. They're stripping out the colors and transitioning to black and white bags.
And they aren't alone in this pivot. Kagome is planning to significantly reduce the tomato illustrations on its iconic ketchup packaging starting in late May.
Oh, wow. Really? Even Nissin Siphon Wellna is completely removing the printed text on the tape that bundles its spaghetti.
At first glance, you might assume this is a coordinated, eco-friendly corporate rebranding campaign to use less ink.
But the reality is much more alarming. The root cause is a severe global shortage and a massive price spike in a chemical called naphtha.
Naphtha. It's an invisible foundational element of modern life. It's a highly versatile petrochemical derivative.
Basically, when you refine crude oil, naphtha is one of the crucial building blocks that gets siphoned off, right?
Yes, exactly. It's the raw material required to manufacture both the colorful inks used in commercial printing and the physical plastics used to create the packaging itself.
And the shortage of naphtha is directly driven by unstable global situations, specifically the escalating tensions in the Middle East and Iran.
Which, circling back, is one of the core issues Trump is in Beijing to discuss. So you have this chain reaction.
Geopolitical friction restricts the flow of crude oil, which creates a bottleneck for naphtha.
Which spikes the cost of ink, which ultimately drains the bright red color from your bottle of ketchup. That's the direct causal chain.
That's wild. But the ripple effect doesn't stop at the grocery store checkout line, does it?
Not at all. This exact same naphtha shortage is currently hitting the Japanese construction industry with the force of a sledgehammer.
Wait, so the exact same chemical that colors my ketchup bottle is literally holding together the walls of a new Tokyo high-rise?
Literally, yes. We are seeing major delays in luxury real estate developments. Look at what's happening right now with Mitsui Fudosan Residential in the Tokyo Bay Area.
Oh, right. They're building a massive complex of high-rise condos, over 2,000 units.
And they are currently warning buyers that the handover of these luxury apartments might be significantly delayed.
Because a modern high-rise building is practically glued together by naphtha derivatives.
Exactly. The polystyrene insulation hidden inside the walls, that is made from naphtha, and the cost for that insulation has jumped 30%.
And it's not just insulation. The paint thinner needed for the metal fittings, the industrial wood adhesives for the flooring, they are all in severe shortage.
So how did our modern supply chains become this dangerously hyper-dependent on a single invisible ingredient?
It's a terrifying structural dependency. I mean, a housing expert estimated this specific shortage could add an estimated 1 million yen to the base cost of building a standard 20 million yen home.
A family could end up paying $1 million extra yen for a house simply because a diplomatic breakdown in the Middle East throttled the supply of an invisible chemical ingredient.
I have to admit, I look at the Calbee chips dropping their ink as a brilliant, agile corporate adaptation. They didn't stop making chips, they just quickly changed the bag.
That is one way to look at it, sure. It shows resilience. But consider the alternative perspective. It's a terrifying canary in the coal mine.
Because a construction company cannot simply decide to build a 40-story residential high-rise with that industrial wood adhesive. The lack of that chemical brings hard infrastructure to a grinding halt.
It really reveals the hidden fragility of the just-in-time global supply chain. But we've been talking about how incredibly fragile our physical supply chains are.
Yeah, and how quickly a bottleneck can delay a construction project. But let's look at a different kind of bottleneck. Let's look at what happens when the delay isn't physical, but bureaucratic.
Right. Japan is currently overhauling a major flaw in its justice system, specifically regarding how it handles retrials for victims of false charges.
This is a monumental revision to Japan's criminal procedure code. To understand why this legislative fight is so important, we have to look at the mechanical flaw that has existed for decades.
When a person is wrongfully convicted, they often spend years or even decades fighting to prove their innocence.
Right, and eventually, if they're successful, a district court will look at the new evidence and officially order a retrial.
You would naturally assume that court order is the ultimate victory, right? The moment the trial actually begins.
But under the current system, that order is just the beginning of another agonizing wait. Prosecutors possess the legal right to file an appeal against that retrial order.
In the Japanese legal system, this is called a kokoku.
Right, an appeal. What actually happens during a kokoku, though? Like, why does a simple appeal cause such a massive delay?
Because it forces the appellate courts to comprehensively re-review the evidence, schedule new hearings, and navigate endless procedural red tape. It effectively freezes the lower court's decision, a bureaucratic amber.
And the most haunting example of this is the Hakamata case, right? Where a man waited an unimaginable 58 years after his arrest for his innocence to be recognized.
Exactly. Even after the court finally decided to grant him a retrial, the prosecutor's appeals dragged the process out. It took 9 excruciating years from the initial decision just to actually start the retrial.
9 years of waiting in a cell for a piece of paper to process. It sounds like playing a game where the referee finally says you win, but the opposing team has a pause button they can press that lasts for 9 years.
Which is why the legislative battle over this rule has been so intense.
Yeah.
The LDP lawmakers and the Justice Ministry recently spent 32 hours locked in intense debate across 11 separate meetings.
The Justice Ministry wanted to maintain the prosecutor's right to appeal, arguing it prevents flawed retrials, while the lawmakers wanted a total, comprehensive ban to protect the falsely accused.
The compromise they finally reached in their third revision draft comes down to a fascinating detail about legal architecture.
The Justice Ministry initially offered to place a principal ban on prosecutor appeals in what is called the fusoku, which are the supplementary provisions or footnotes of the law.
But the lawmakers adamantly rejected that placement. They demanded the ban be written into the Hansoku, which is the main text of the law itself.
Moving this rule to the main text of the law is like finally confiscating that pause button. Why does that specific placement matter so much, though?
Moving a rule from a supplementary footnote to the main text elevates its legal weight immensely. It changes the default presumption of the law. If it's in the main text, the default state is that prosecutors cannot appeal.
Oh, I see. So the agreement dictates that prosecutors can now only appeal if there are highly sufficient grounds.
Exactly. We actually hear this exact sentiment echoed by Shoji Maekawa, a man who was acquitted after 40 years in a Fukui murder case.
He stated publicly that while leaving a loophole like sufficient grounds isn't the absolute total ban he had hoped for, embedding the restriction in the main text is a massive step forward.
A life-altering step forward for people currently sitting in prison waiting for justice.
40 years waiting for an acquittal. As slow and punishing as those bureaucratic systems can be, we are simultaneously witnessing moments of incredibly rapid, groundbreaking triumph in Japan right now.
The contrast is truly striking. We are seeing massive milestones in both science and culture. On the scientific front, Japan has just approved the world's first practical application of iPS cell regenerative medicine to be covered under public medical insurance.
This treatment was developed by Sumitomo Pharma, and it is specifically targeting Parkinson's disease. They are aiming to perform the first transplant this year.
To understand the magnitude of this, you have to understand how iPS cells actually work. Induced pluripotent stem cells are essentially adult cells that have been scientifically reprogrammed back into an embryonic-like state.
Meaning they possess the extraordinary ability to transform into almost any type of tissue in the human body.
Right. For Parkinson's patients, scientists can engineer these cells to replace the very specific neural networks in the brain that the disease has destroyed.
They're literally rebuilding the brain's hardware. But the economics of this miracle are staggering. The cost for this regenerative treatment is set at approximately 55.3 million yen per patient.
It is an astronomical price tag, but it reflects the immense complexity of reprogramming human biology on a cellular level.
55.3 million yen for a single treatment is a staggering price, but it proves the immense value we place on extending human life.
And that brings us to the cultural milestone, because while science fights to extend our timeline, Art is how we express the depth of that time.
Exactly. Then we look at Cannes, where we celebrate how we express that life. At the 79th Cannes Film Festival, Koji Fukada's film Nadia's Diary, starring Takako Matsu, just had its official screening in the competition section.
The film dives into the delicate, intricate human relationships surrounding a sculptor in a serene rural setting, and Takako Matsu spoke about the profound sensory experience of the event.
She noted how moved she was to feel the audience's fine, attentive reactions up until the very last moment, realizing she was in a room full of people who truly love cinema.
And the success of Nadia's Diary is part of a much larger wave this year. Hirokazu Koreeda is nominated for his film The Sheep in the Box, and Ryusuke Hamaguchi is nominated for Suddenly Feeling Unwell.
This marks the first time in an astounding 25 years that 3 Japanese directors are in the main competition simultaneously.
It's an incredible moment for Japanese cinema on the global stage.
Are we witnessing a unique golden age of Japanese innovation right now, both on the microscopic cellular level and on the global cinematic stage?
It certainly feels like a convergence of extreme human endeavor. Both disciplines required decades of unseen, meticulous work culminating in a sudden, visible triumph.
It is an incredible, uplifting contrast to the heavy, high-stakes geopolitical tension we started with today. Let's bring all this together for you.
Today, we've traced the invisible lines from a presidential handshake on a Beijing runway to the missing colors on a bag of potato chips,
to the exact wording in a legal document that restores a person's freedom, and finally to the red carpet at Cannes.
Being well-informed isn't just about knowing isolated facts. It's about seeing how the world is a deeply interconnected web.
Every headline impacts the other. The next time you pick up a product at the store and notice a slightly faded label or a missing logo, ask yourself what distant global conflict or what invisible chemical shortage changed this tiny detail in your hands.
The world is constantly talking to you through the mundane.
You just have to know how to listen.